All right. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. This is Jamie Green from My Mother's Cry. And we have a really, really good conversation for you tonight. I am honored to introduce to each of you the VP
Jamie, Jamie, the sound
for
is
A
a little
Mother's
bit off.
Cry, Ms. Michelle Kennedy-Kouadio. She did a phenomenal job. I am just excited that God sent her my way. So, first of all, before we get into the conversation,
Jamie, you're breaking up. I can't hear your audio
yes,
very well. You might have to take your headset
yeah,
off.
you broke up too.
Oh no.
I don't know if that's it or not. I'll try it. As you broke up when you were speaking, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, hold on one
Now I
second.
can hear myself.
All right, well, we'll just do it like this. If anybody has any problem hearing us, please feel free to comment um, and let us know so that we can move forward and fix that. Okay. First of all, again, as I said, I am excited to have the VP for A Mother's Cry, Ms. Michele Kennedy-Kouadio, with me tonight. Michelle is a godsend in many areas, and I just thank God for her. So, before we get into the conversation, Michelle, just say good evening to everybody.
Good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Glad to join my partner, Reverend Jamesina Green. Thanks for asking me, Jamie.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I want to start by saying that Michelle is the epitome of a go-getter. She's the epitome of a person when you ask when you have somebody on your team, you don't want to constantly be having to say, "Did you take care of that? Did you take care of this?" Michelle, you know, and I'll tell you a little bit about her background to give you some understanding as to why Michelle does things the way that she does. I have I'm sorry, first of all, I want to say I'm dealing with major sinus issues. So if you have trouble hearing me, please let me know. Um, and I will try to fix it. Of course, I've misplaced my paperwork, Michelle, with your bio on it. So just tell everybody a little bit about your background, um, the gifts that you have been able to help you in your position as vice president. Just tell us a little bit about Michelle.
Well, I think the biggest thing that influenced me was my parents. I have to give them credit. They stood up for people that sometimes were the underdogs. My Swedish grandmother came over to this country. Her husband died, leaving her with four kids. At a time, it wasn't popular to be an immigrant, much less a single parent with four kids. So my father and my mother were very mindful of, helping people that were suffering or marginalized. So justice from the beginning was where it's at. And for me, the primary driver for me is both my spiritual program. I don't make any apologies for being Catholic and being influenced by the Holy Spirit. And that's where my center is. God's grace, we say we don't hide light under a bushel basket. Now, all that said, that's my primary motivation in doing anything to help anybody, whether they're in prison or, suffering some other kind of dilemma. But the second thing is, I was blessed with this certain acumen of what I call being a strategic planner, looking at the issue at hand and the impact that we hope for a target audience, in this case, men and women suffering behind Maryland prison walls. And so, as a strategic planner, I have to look at the monies and the plans and assess and analyze and then figure out where the pressure points are, whether with politicians or anybody else, that can influence a course of change. And so I did this. I started out as a Peace Corps volunteer, 77 to 79. I lived in another country in Africa. And then for 30 plus years, I was international trade finance, strategic planning. I was women's executive leadership trained. So I kind of think I was born with that skill set. But the main thing that connects me and Jamie Green is that we believe that God is merciful and kind, and that no matter what, He is going to help us spiritually to connect with people, especially the mothers and parents of people that are incarcerated behind the walls, and give us that strength and determination. And we don't apologize for being smart ladies either. We do what's necessary with the intelligence and the gifts that God's given us to make changes. And so on that matter, I think that, as a team, we've done a great job. I don't know if Serena Lau is on this call, but she's like the third of the triumvirate as a leader. So I don't know if Serena's on, but anyhow, it's a pleasure to work with you, Jamie. I've told you, you give me the center. We give each other a center sometime spiritually when it seems like the task or the efforts, on behalf of 16,000 people behind the walls are suffering, and also their families are suffering, whether it's the mothers, the wives, the husbands, the children. So in that, we will remain undeterred in our effort to make things better behind the walls in Maryland prisons.
Absolutely, absolutely. And guys, I'm gonna tell you this, and you'll get a laugh out of it. When I told Michele I wanted her to come and have a conversation with me tonight. I asked her for like 4 or 5 things that she's done or is doing on the behalf of a Mother's Cry for those that we're advocating for. And I can only tell you that when I asked Michele for these 4 or 5 things, she sent me a full strategic plan for the whole state of Maryland. But that's why she's my VP, because she sees things I wouldn't even think of. Um, God has used Michele to walk a Mother's Cry into doors, into areas that we would not have walked into had the two of us not connected. And I just absolutely love her. Those of you that watch the Golden Girls, and I know there's several of my friends that I always tell Michele she is my personal Dorothy, because she's very verbal about how she feels, and she's not, once she makes her mind up that what she's doing is going to help somebody, she's not going to back down on it, not even for me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit. Let's talk a little bit, Michele, about because some people have the idea that a Mother's Cry is just a group of mothers that get together and we cry and we commiserate, I should say, about the conditions of our children behind the wall. Now, I have to be honest and say that 20 some years ago, when I started a Mother's Cry, it was a support group for mothers who had children that are incarcerated. But we have grown and we have evolved into so much more. So I want to talk about a couple of things, Michele, that you are doing on the behalf of a Mother's Cry, and have you to explain it to our audience a little bit more. Michele is actively engaging with the Maryland Senate and the House budget with regard to the budget and those committees that handle the money. She has delivered oral and written testimony that will influence the 2027 budget, focusing on prison conditions, staffing, and systemic reform. Michele, tell us a little bit about, um, with regard to the conditions in the prison, what you have been really focused on um, addressing for our loved ones behind the wall. What are some of the things that we're absolutely concerned about right now?
We're concerned about extreme heat. I gave an interview with WMAR in 2024 and 2025 that starting May or June through August, temperatures reach over 100 degrees in the cells. There's no air conditioning, it's little personal fans. And furthermore, our folks are locked behind the cells for about 23 hours out of a day, 22 hours. So if you combine that with 2 people per cell, I don't know what the cell size is, 6 by 9 or something very small, then you hardly have air to breathe. And this causes, is contributing factor in some cases during extreme heat to some of the deaths that are experienced. The second one is having out of cell time. We push for the fact that they should have at least 5 hours out of the cell. And especially during extreme heat, we've suggested that they rent air conditioning units and in the common areas let these guys out of the cell during extreme heat. The other thing is the food quality. The food, just reported to me by Western Maryland and Eastern Shore, is that they're now serving milk out of jugs. They're giving milk to the incarcerated individual in cups. This is totally unsanitary, and it's probably against the regulations of the Department of Health. It's unacceptable. There's also been, vermin droppings in the food, and sometimes they're taking leftovers and reconstituting it, and it's not nutritious. So we're going to be looking at that. The other thing is medical and psychiatric care. It's hardly non-existent. There was a lot of reports about, non-compliance with these medical contractors, including psychiatric or psychological effects. And DPSCS is now, trying to do a better job of oversight on these contracts. But what it means to our individuals is when they go through a medical, including dental or psychiatric, and they don't get the proper assessment or the proper follow-up care, they can either be debilitated or they die. The other thing that we're looking at is outdoors time. It'd been about a year and our folks had not been outdoors, hadn't seen the light of day. This is untenable. Exercise time, they need to have that. They need out of doors time, out of cell time, and to have time in the gym. The other thing, starting with COVID, if not longer, the food was served to the people serving the trays outside of the prison cell. Well, guess what, folks? When you start bringing food to the cells, you're bringing vermin. And so that was not, acceptable. And we worked with the commission last year, and at ECI, they started serving food back in the dining hall, where at least there can be some social activity getting out of the cell. The final thing, but not the only thing, is, there's 2 more things. One is religious and recovery services. Right now, I would say that over 70% of the prison population is affected by mental health issues and addiction. Yet, only about 70%, if that, no, only 3%, if that,
Yeah.
gets the proper psychological or addiction counseling that they need in prisons. The final thing is that when I looked at the budget, just a couple of things. The facilities, there's 14 state facilities. They're aging prisons with climate, and heat rising because of this climate issue. Those state facilities need refurbishment. They need replacement of pipes. They need some kind of, strategic air conditioning systems and that sort of thing. They need repair and replacement of electrical apparatus. They need significant cleaning of air ducts and also, eradication of rodents. So, but when I looked at the budget for the capital improvement program, there was zero in the budget to address these things. They've only got on the operational budget a total of 30 million. Well, if I looked at 5 million per facility to start, that would be something like 70 million, which is what I suggested that they put into the operational budget. It's just a drop in the bucket. So these are some of the areas that we hope as advocates to work with DPSCS leadership, and they've agreed to meet with us to find solutions, even while we're experiencing extreme staff shortages of correctional officers and others. We have to find a way forward. As a mother's cry, these are our children behind the walls. We cannot allow them to continue to die or to suffer. Most of them are going to return back to the communities or their families, and we want them to be whole. And this is, by the way, for any of us that are Christian, this is the teachings of Jesus Christ. We don't ask people to be Christians to join our efforts, but this is kind of what, Jamie and I, how we were raised and how we believe. Next.
God, I just love this woman. Michele, I do want to let you know that Trinice and Perpetua are joining us over on our YouTube
Oh, great.
channel, and they're talking about the good
Love
work that A
those
Mother's Cry
ladies.
has done for them as well.
Love those ladies.
Absolutely. These are two mothers that we have been blessed to meet and to work with regard to some issues of for their loved ones behind the wall. And so as long as Michele and I breathe, we're going to keep interceding and advocating for not only our loved ones behind the wall, but for these mothers that carry this burden every day. So, Michele, let me ask you this. You had a 40-year international career negotiating major agreements. How has that prepared you for advocacy work?
Well, when I was working on the development side, engaging with various countries and organizations such as Catholic Relief Service, CARE, and many others, Mercy Corps, I had to look at legal agreements. These were agreements that we engaged with these organizations that were then engaging in agreements with these countries to introduce programs. So while I'm not a lawyer, let's just say that I have an eye to look at legal documents and to make them come to life. So when I'm seeing these documents, because I was overseas, I can envision what these documents are conveying and what it means for impact on the ground, if that makes sense. With my trade finance background, I said, I'm a Scottish Kennedy. Nobody beats the Scots when it comes to money. So when we're looking at the money, a Scot is always wondering, what are we getting our money's worth? And as a taxpayer, that's what I'm wondering. Or if I've got, like somebody behind the walls, I'm wondering, are our funds being well spent to preserve the life of our incarcerated loved ones? Are our monies being well spent to make sure that we recruit and hire correctional officers that can do the job and are not forced to work overtime, an impact that's, detrimental to the benefit of themselves and their families? So we care about everybody suffering behind the walls, both the staff as well as, our incarcerated loved ones. So I would say that a critical analysis and not being afraid to look at money, not being afraid to assess whether how the money's being spent, and whether or not we're getting what we call evidence-based impact. That means that you can see it. So, for example, if I look at, whether we're making an intervention that has impact, then I would say, okay, our sons are out of the cell 5 hours a day. They're getting food that's nutritious. There's no vermin in it. They're getting containerized, milk with a, expiration date. They're getting medical services when called for with follow-up and proper treatment. They're getting, time out of the cell in common areas where it's cool during the extreme heat. These are things that we can see and that's reported to us by our folks behind the walls. So, and then I look at, we asked for data on deaths in custody since 2013. Well, the trend is going upward on deaths in custody. And when I asked for January 2026, the deaths probably increased dramatically there. Some of that might be attributed to, the critical staffing shortages and some other things. So I would say that, in my 40-year international career, I was a businesswoman working in the government, but I always looked at it and acted as if it was my money. That if this were my money I was spending and I was looking for a positive result for those targeted populations, whether it was the hungry kids, in Bangladesh, or whether, like say on the other end, we had people that were buying our U.S. agricultural products and could get better financing terms to do that, then I was always looking for what that target audience needed and how I could facilitate that. Is that a highfalutin answer or what?
That's a Michele Kennedy-Kouadio answer. What are you talking about? That's funny.
Well,
I love it.
are you asking me literally what I'm talking about? So I have to explain all over again?
No, I'm just being funny. I love it. We have some of the weirdest conversations. You all would not believe it. Um, but we pray together. We pray for each other. We make each other laugh. Sometimes we don't agree. I mean, that's human nature.
Hey, you're breaking up again.
And I some people have
You're still breaking up.
asked me, and I think this is a good time.
I didn't
Apologize
understand a word you
just a
said.
moment. Well, Michelle, did you hear my question?
No.
Okay. Some people would like to know how you and I got together, how we connected.
I remember that very well. So I had been working, actually, it was at the suggestion of Will Smith, my senator, um, when my son was first convicted. And I thought it was a travesty of justice. I didn't know where to go and what I could do to alleviate some of my anger and all of that. And Will Smith suggested that I join the Maryland Alliance for Justice Reform. And I learned a lot about, presenting, supporting bills verbally and in writing. But there came a time when, as a mother with a son behind prison walls, I didn't see that any of the legislative bills that I was supporting was really helping my son living in the conditions he was living in prisons. So this is funny. I met Jamie because she was having this, get together. And I thought, I need to join that because these are mothers like me that are sharing their feelings, right? So I think I need to join that. So I joined, and it was good because I was feeling heard. I was feeling understood as a mother. And about 3 weeks later, Jamie calls me 9:45 p.m. and she says, I just have to share this. My son Byron, he just called me and he had all kind of feelings and things going on, and I am just feeling overwhelmed. Now, her son's been behind the walls quite a long time, but that night he was having a meltdown, and Jamie, as a mother, and I've been through this, was having a meltdown as well. So, excuse my language now. When I heard that, the first thing I thought was, I'll be damned, meaning this, we're going to change this. We're not just going to sit by wringing our hands, weeping and crying. We're going to get into action. And so about a week later, I got on the phone with Jamie. It might have even been 2 days later. I said, Jamie, can you make me the vice president of A Mother's Cry? And there was a big pause, like, huh? Yeah, I said, so I've got some ideas for strategy and how we can get into action. Can you make this happen? She said, well, I'll have to check with some people and I'll get back to you. A couple of days later, I call her and I said, Jamie, where are we on this vice president thing? Is this going to happen? She says, I'll get right back to you. And the rest is history. Is that pretty accurate, Jamie?
That's pretty accurate. Like it was definitely divine connection. Like seriously. Um, and there's some people, Trinice and Petua are just really going through over here on YouTube. Like, A Mother's Cry is the best organization. They're more compassionate than any other organization. I think we're gonna have to pay them some money for
That sounds
all
good.
this PR marketing they're doing. No, seriously. But that's another thing. We'll talk about the money at the end of the conversation. But yeah, I just absolutely needed somebody that was as passionate about what's going on behind the wall as I was, but were wanting to or capable of moving beyond complaining and making a list of grievances, right? I already had people that could give me a list of grievances. Michele immediately was like, okay, that's not acceptable. This is what we're going to do. You need to, if you make me VP, that'll give me more authority when I go into these spaces. And I was like, all right, Dorothy, handle your business. And, and
And you
I
let me do it.
absolutely, and I absolutely do not regret a second of our coming together. I really, really appreciate all that you're doing. Now, let me ask you this question. Um, how does, in your opinion, how does A Mother's Cry uniquely support families and loved ones of incarcerated persons? I know what I say as a mom and as a president of AMC, but as a mother and a VP, what makes us unique?
What makes us unique from the other advocacy organizations that I've worked with over the years, primarily supporting bills and legislation, all of which are important, is that we are working specifically on conditions behind the walls, some of which I enumerated early on, whether it's out of time, out of cell time, whether it's outdoors time, whether it's getting medical and psychiatric care more immediately, dealing with extreme heat. So the reason that we're effective and I think listened to is we actually have sons or daughters that are in prison. So it's not like, you're waiting for us to do research and get the data. We are getting live in time reports from our family members that are behind the walls. And for that reason, we care because when my son calls and he's having an issue, as a mother, I want to make that issue go away or I want to make it better. So I don't need somebody, engaging or telling me what's going on or what isn't. We already know what's going on. The second thing is that whenever a mother or a family member calls us, and I think Perpetua can attest to this, Maria and some others, our first mission is to put our arms around that family member who has somebody in prison because we understand that pain that they're going through and we understand what it is to feel alone, not knowing what to do. And so our first mission is to put our arms around them and to tell them we send greetings to their son or daughter behind the walls because we care. That is our paramount. That's what connects me and Jamie, is that we really care that deeply. Now, at that point, we have to detach a little bit from our emotions, right, Jamie? And then
That's
we have
right.
to get into action to figure out the next step, the best way to approach it. We work, whether we collaborate with the union, the ombudsman's office has been great in supporting us to, intercede and help the commissioner, and the secretary. We're happy that they've, said they're going to continue to work with us. The other thing that makes us different is as advocates, and this is a first, we are, I don't want to say we're insisting, but we believe that solutions can come forward if we as advocates are included in the planning process along with the Department of Public Safety and Corrections, whether it's at the governor's level, whether it's the Department of Corrections and Safety. Secretary Scruggs is actually a cabinet member of the governor, Governor Moore. So we did a lot this year, like say, because of my experience in money, we were meeting with the treasurer, the comptroller, the Department of Budget and Management, or at least I'm waiting to have that meeting. I'm still waiting for their phone call. And, we do a lot of interactions. We have private meetings with delegates and senators on the budget committees, anybody that we think is going to be effective in pushing forward, whether it's funding or pushing forward accountability on making sure that those funds and staff is properly executed so that our people are living and are getting the services that they need until such time that they're released.
Absolutely. Because we
Yeah.
don't believe that we know that the prison is not meant to be a vacation spot. We understand that. But we also understand that these are human beings and that they have basic human rights that should not be violated just because they are convicted of a crime. And so we're adamant about that. We don't care what the conviction was, we don't what the whatever. That if we can have a say in that person being treated fairly. We have a mother who son was in solitary confinement, right, for many days,
You're
like
breaking up again, Jamie.
a total of 80 days. That's crazy.
I still can't hear you, Jamie.
Like, how do you expect a person to?
Jamie, you're
I think
breaking
I'm
up.
gonna have to upgrade my Wi-Fi.
Well, either that or maybe have people mute if there are
Can you hear
people
me
that are
now?
not muted. Maybe they could mute.
All right, but I was saying that when somebody comes to us with an issue about something that's happening to their loved one behind the wall, we don't ignore it. We don't say, "Oh well, too bad." If they didn't commit a crime, they wouldn't be in there. We don't do that. Our immediate response is from the heart of a mother, from our belief as Christians. What are we supposed to do? What can we do? And that's one of the things that I love about uh, Michele is because she's constantly strategically working ways to affect change with regard to even policy. Michele has testified, as I said before legislation about our concerns, but at the same time she's a mother and she has a mother's heart. And one of the things that we're working on that we're going to get an answer to soon is how people that are behind the bars can reach the correctional ombudsman's office to express their concerns or issues, because we're having some problems with figuring out how that gets done. But that is something that we're definitely going to address. One of our mothers says that uh, a mother's cry focuses on individual inmate issues, but we also focus on policy change because we're not going to, and I say this all the time, what we are dealing with as a mother's cry, Michele and I, and all of these young, wonderful people that work with us, is we are fighting against a system that has been in place for decades, right? So we can't change everything overnight, but we will acknowledge that we know change has to be made. So that's where we are with a mother's cry. We're doing what we can to affect change for our loved ones behind the wall and for their families that are directly impacted by what's going on behind the wall. Michele, did you want to say anything else about the systemic changes that we're working on?
Yeah, how did you know? So I want to harken back to New York State. So about 2 years ago, New York State had 5 prisons where the correctional officers were striking. And it was for the same exact reasons that we're experiencing Maryland, and which we expressed concern about over the last 2 years. And so I remember the governor ordered these people back to work. They said they were striking. She ordered them back to work. She was going to fire them. She fired 2,000 correctional officers. To date, they have yet to be able to recruit and hire correctional officers. So a lot of these folks are waiting in detention centers where, guess what? In the detention centers, they're typically, the correctional officers are paid more than they are in the state prisons. That's the case in Maryland. For example, in the state prisons where you're at high risk, you're paid maybe $52,000 to start, and maybe you get a one-time bonus. In Montgomery County Detention Center with less risk, you start out at 60,000. So we need to do a better job systemically of hiring or rethinking how we staff prisons in Maryland. And we have to make sure that legislators or the system understands that we value the life of incarcerated individuals, that they deserve to have the food and the proper medical attention and the proper outdoor time, because most of them are going to return to their families. Most of them are going to return to society, and we want them to be able to work productively. But if you don't care about that and you don't care about our families, what about public safety? If you think that people are going to go into a system for 20, 30 years, but we don't have the resources, we don't have the correctional officers necessary, or we're not treating people humanely. And by the way, folks, 70% of the stability in a prison comes from the long-term people that have been in prison that have, either had a religious conversion, or they're in NA, or they're just leaders that are choosing a different path. Those are the ones that provide stability in a prison. So you don't want to upset that by depriving them of time outdoors. I mean, time out of their cell, time outdoors, creating a healthy environment so you don't have strikes. So I would say that it makes good sense all the way around for public safety to be able to have properly managed prison facilities. So, Jamie, you're right about that. We are pushing um, toward, a change in policy and how the prisons are managed in Maryland. And to that extent, you asked how a mother's cry is different. We recruit strategically from our volunteer corps. I mean, I'm going to name some of them: Perpetua, Trinice, Serena, Dr. Purcell Shannon, all of them volunteers. And, with a lot of smarts and a lot of insight, like us, Jamie. They're not just, like, say, spiritually motivated. They're smart ladies. They're smart, dedicated ladies. Deborah Shipman, so many, Margaret Stokes, so many that we've enlisted, Maria Fiorentino, Lou Rembach. I mean, we are so blessed to have these folks that work with us, but believe in the mission and what we're trying to do on behalf of the folks behind the walls. I will give a shout out to the secretary that when we asked to increase Family Day from one time a year, where, say, the incarcerated individual can get together and have family time with their children or their mothers or their aunts, that the secretary said she was willing to expand it up to 3 times in a year. We love that. We understand that she did a father-daughter dance. I think it was in the Jessup complex. So all of these things that improve the lives of our folks that are behind the walls, that create this stability, especially in the significant shortage of correctional officers or other staff, this is what we're going to be working with the secretary on and with the commissioner on and his team. We want to work in partnership and figure out solutions together, both on the short, medium, and longer term. So I'm more than hopeful. I'm having expectations. I mean, my God, he's like, Michele, leave me alone. But in this case, I'm going to say, we're going to grant you wishes because you're on the right track. We're trying to represent the interests and needs of people that some would say are marginalized. They don't deserve a second chance. They don't deserve a look. This is another one, Magdalena Songas. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
so many heroes out there that, Jamie, you and I could stay here all day long and mention folks. The correctional ombudsman, Yvonne Briley Wilson, she's been, a great advocate in helping us. So we are going to remain faithful and undeterred in our determination to help our family members, but to help society at large, that we don't experience the same thing that New York State went through. We can't afford that. And by the way, I'll tell you, as a money person, when I started looking at how I thought that the monies could be better handled in the budget with regard to, the prison facilities, that started me thinking, well, if I've got concerns in this area, as a taxpayer, what other areas in government management should I be looking at? You remember I told you when I started out, we want to make sure we're getting our money's worth. We need to change the template. You remember when I talked about evidence-based uh, metrics? That's what they call it, metrics, measuring. We want to make sure that our folks behind the walls are living, they're getting proper nutrition, adequate or proper, medical attention, psychiatric attention, recovery services, that they, the temperatures in the cells and, in the common areas are appropriate. I mean, I will just say this: try to live in a cell 6 by 9, because we're coming up on extreme heat, with no air conditioning and a little fan, and it's climbing to over 120 degrees in that cell, and you're locked in that cell for 22 to 23 hours in a day. And some of you who are aging in prison might have a heart condition, might have some other physical ailments. Just imagine that. Is that right? Can we just relegate, well, that's just, the cost of doing business? Well, for somebody like me, it makes me start to look at the money. How is the money being spent? Is it being spent to settle lawsuits? Is it being spent, for contracts that are improperly managed? So contracts for the food services, contracts for medical care, psychiatric care, you have to have proper oversight to make sure that these contracts are being implemented properly and that our incarcerated individuals are getting, proper treatment and on time. So, again, I'm just going to say, Jamie, I thank God I've said that, the reason that we work well together is we're each other's center. When we feel like we're getting off track, whether with egos or something else, we have to come back to the people that we're representing, and that is the people behind the walls and their families. I can tell you, for any of the folks behind the walls that have children, family members, but especially children, we have those family days. That brings a 2 hours of normalcy for those families. That is something that is such a blessing. We hope to work with strategically with people that have lived experience. Those are returned citizens that have been in prison, that have a lot to contribute by, how we can improve the conditions in the prisons behind the wall. And then also with the people that are currently incarcerated. We value their experience and perspective on how we can bring safety and balance into the prisons. And if we bring it into the prisons, maybe we can do a good job of making sure that people that should be in prison are able to serve their time, because we have adequate resources that are managed properly. So that was a whole mouthful. Are you sure you want to ask me another question?
All right, you people see what I had to put up with, right? You see what I had to put up with. But seriously, we're gonna be bringing this home now. Um, our ladies over on YouTube are still, talking about what a great job we're doing with helping them with their loved ones behind the wall, dealing with mental health, which is a whole another thing that we're going to be digging in a little deeper, Michelle, is the mental health behind the prison wall. I'm like really disturbed about some of the things I'm hearing. So we're going to talk about that a little later, the two of us, and then you help come up strategically with how we're going to address it. But I want to ask you this before we wind down. You've walked this journey as a mother of an incarcerated son for about 9 years now. What has the experience been like for you overall as a mother? Not as a strategist, as a mother.
Well, as a mother, as a Christian, I can only go to, Mary, the mother of Jesus, watching her son go through this torture, but never averting her gaze. She was there from the beginning to the end, and never, lost faith in her son and his journey. And that's, as a mother, how I feel, that as much pain as we have, we cannot turn our gaze away. And we're so hopeful, and we do everything that we can to try to make life better for, our sons or daughters behind the walls. I was really happy that my son shared, he's been a leader in recovery groups. I'm sure he's helped a lot of people, just like your son has. And I was happy that he was asked to share his personal testimony in one of the church services. And I liked the way he recounted the story and the biblical phrases that he used, that encourage folks that are trying to carve out a different path for themselves, even in prison, where the circumstances are sometimes untenable. But they're finding this faith or spiritual space, helping each other in that spiritual journey. So if I'm a numbers person, I said I make up numbers all the time. But I would say if I had the worst of the worst in prison, maybe that's 10% of the population that maybe for whatever reason can't be redeemed. But most of them can be. And I would say that the prison population, for those that are, 53% are there for over 20 years or so, maybe 25% of those are lifers. But those folks, for the most part, unless they get involved in gangs or in drugs, are the ones that are providing the mentoring and the coaching. So we need to expand on that. That's what brings stability. We need to make sure that those people that are leaders are rewarded in some sense, or given certificates or, diplomas or something for all of the work that they do behind the walls. So as a mother, I'm proud of my son. I'm proud that he's been able to survive in prison. I'm proud that he's been able to develop a profound relationship with God that works for him. I'm proud that he's been able to, God is behind the walls, that he's been able to help and encourage some others, and that he also has probably been encouraged despite the circumstances. And so, in this Lenten season for some of us, and, we'll be, arriving at Easter pretty soon, but we're going through the dark period right now. But we know that there's light and hope. That's what we believe, and that's what we're going to, maintain in helping families and their incarcerated loved ones. So as a mother, this is going to sound weird, but I feel blessed that God has given me the courage to be able to stand by my son and to feel hopefulness, and to share that, with my sisters and brothers, some of whom are on this call. God, I almost feel like crying.
Yeah, me too. Thank you so much. That was from the heart, right? And that's what I wanted to hear. That's what I wanted to see. That's what I wanted the people to know. That in spite of how strong we are, how hard we are working, at the core we are mothers, and we're mothers who have sons that are in a predicament, in a situation that we can't control. That if we could back our vehicles up to the gate, we would go get them and bring them home, but we can't. So, no matter what we're doing, no matter where we are, we're still mothers at the core. I'm going to close with this. This is more than just a podcast, right? This is a movement. This is work that we're doing that is changing lives. If something that you heard tonight speaks to your heart, then we're asking you, inviting you to become a supporter of A Mother's Cry. Because we're not just holding space for mothers, we're holding space for our loved ones behind the walls. We need your support. One of the things that we don't talk about much, Michele and I, but we're going to have to talk about more, is the financial part of what we do. We have been blessed to have some experts that donate their time, volunteer their expertise. They, reach out to them and say, "Hey, what do you think about such thing?" And they respond. But we're not always going to be able to do that. We're going to have to be able to give gifts or stipends or what have you. And so we need your support. We need you to join A Mother's Cry. You can go to www.amotherscry.org. That is our website, and you can sign up there. We genuinely appreciate each and every one of you for tuning in tonight. I am excited. I am encouraged. No matter what's going on, no matter how I'm feeling, Everybody that knows me knows I have a lot of health challenges and blah, blah, blah. But if I get on the phone with Michele, she'll say something that uplifts me, encourages me. And I know that God put us together. And Mother's Cry is not just here to take up space. We are changing lives, and I thank God for that. We need you to come and join us and support us. Michele, do you have any closing remarks?
Amen. That's it. But I want to thank everybody. Like I said, for those, if any of you have been collaborators or working with me, you know what a tall order that is, right? But I always appreciate,
Amen.
the
Amen.
people that have been responding and doing the work.
All
Lou,
right. Well, we're going to let you.
I can't hear what you said, but thank you. I still can't hear you.
It's okay. We're having some issues, but I think overall everybody got the message. Um, our girls over on YouTube are saying this was a wonderful podcast, and I am so grateful, Michele, that you took time out to join me tonight. And I'm looking forward to what we're going to be doing next.
Oh, by the way, some people were asking, and I don't know enough about podcasts. Is this something that if they couldn't join tonight, they can listen to later? Will it be on our website or something?
Yes, ma'am. It's
Okay.
going to be on the YouTube channel.
Well, whatever that
All
means. How
right,
does?
everybody. Well, I will give you the link. I will put the link on the website.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Jamie, and thank you,
All right,
everybody.
everyone. Thank you so much.
All
Thank you,
right.
Michele. Have a
Have a
great
good.
evening.
Yep. You too.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.